New Year's Day, 1885, and I stepped off the stage in Colorado with three things: one traveling bag, one reporter's notebook, and one ironclad resolution. The cold bit through my wool coat like teeth. I pulled my scarf tighter and surveyed the mining town stretched before me, rough wooden buildings clinging to the mountainside, smoke rising from 100 chimneys. The constant sound of picks striking rock echoing through thin air. I cataloged it all the way. I'd learned to catalog everything, observe, record, maintain distance. A woman approached from the largest building, her face weathered like the wood surrounding us. "You'd be Mrs. Henderson, the journalist from back east." "I am." I shifted my bag to shake her hand. "Martha Brennan. I keep the hotel." Her grip was firm, her eyes measuring. "Week's not long enough to understand this place." "Good thing I'm not here to understand it," I said. "Just document it." Something flickered in her expression: disappointment. Maybe. Or recognition. "Room's ready. Supper's at 6. I followed her inside, grateful for warmth. The hotel was clean, but spare. Like everything else in this town. Like me, I supposed. 2 years I'd been paring down, learning to need less, learning to need no one. My room was small. A bed, a chair, a washstand. I unpacked methodically: one spare dress, one skirt, toiletries, my notebook. The economy of a woman who'd learned not to carry excess, not to carry hope. I sat on the bed and opened my journal, writing in careful script January 1st, 1885. Resolution. Prove a widow can succeed professionally without depending on anyone, especially men. 1 week in this Colorado mining town. Document frontier life. Return to civilization. Prove independence. The words looked solid on paper, convincing outside my window. The town sprawled rough and unwelcoming. Men shouted to each other in the street below. A woman hurried past, shawl pulled tight, 3 children trailing behind her. I watched them disappear around a corner. I'd chosen this assignment deliberately. Remote, temporary, perfect. No one here knew me. No one would pity the widow. No one would see the cracks I'd spent 2 years plastering over. I made myself stand, wash my face in the cold water from the basin. The mirror showed what it always showed: a woman of 32 who looked older. Brown hair pulled back, severe. Dark circles I'd stopped trying to hide. I looked capable. Controlled. Exactly what I'd been building. The dining room filled for supper. I sat alone at a small table, notebook open, observing miners with coal-dusted faces, a few families. Martha moving between tables with practiced efficiency. I wrote notes about frontier community, social structures, the roles women carved in harsh places. I'd learned to set one plate for dinner, make coffee for one, wake alone without flinching. That was enough. That had to be enough. 7 days. I could survive anything for 7 days. I'd survived worse. The sheriff arrived the next morning while I was interviewing miners in the hotel lobby. "Mrs. Henderson." Martha's voice carried warning. "This is Sheriff Connor Davies. He likes to know who's new in town." I looked up from my notebook. He was tall, somewhere in his 30s, with eyes that had seen things they didn't want to remember. I recognized that look. I saw it in my own mirror. "Sheriff," I closed my notebook deliberately. He removed his hat. "Ma'am, Martha tells me you're here for a week, writing about the town." "That's correct. Town can be dangerous for the unprepared." His voice was even, stating fact, not threat. I stood, matching his formality. "I don't need looking after, Sheriff. Didn't offer, just stating facts." We regarded each other across the space between us. I noticed things I didn't want to notice: the efficiency of his movements, the careful distance he maintained, the wedding ring hanging on a chain at his collar. A widower. Then Martha had mentioned him briefly, wife killed in a stage robbery 3 years back. I appreciate the concern, I said, not appreciating it at all. I'll be careful. He nodded once and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Martha's right about one thing. Week's not long enough to understand this place. I'm not here to understand it. Something flickered in his expression, the same thing I'd seen in Martha's face. Disappointment or recognition? I couldn't tell which. After he left, I tried to return to my interviews, but my concentration had fractured. I'd recognized something in him, the wall he'd built, the careful isolation. I'd constructed the same thing, brick by careful brick. I didn't want to recognize him. Recognition led to connection. Connection led to caring. Caring led to the kind of pain I'd spent 2 years learning to live without. That afternoon, I walked through town taking notes. The general store, the assay office, the small schoolhouse. Connor appeared twice, once helping an elderly woman with her parcels, once mediating a dispute between 2 minors. Both times, he worked efficiently, quietly, maintaining his careful distance from everyone. I understood that distance. I lived in it. When he noticed me watching the second time, our eyes met. For a moment, something passed between us 2 people, recognizing the same survival strategy in each other. I looked away first. That evening, I wrote aggressively in my journal about professional boundaries, about the dangers of involvement, about leaving in 6 days. The words felt hollow, even as I wrote them. I noticed I'd set 2 coffee cups out that morning, stared at them before putting one away. Old habits, I told myself. Lies. Myself answered back. The crisis came on day 3. I was writing in the hotel lobby when Martha burst through the door, face tight with worry. Doctor's drunk. Woman's in difficult labor, needs help now. I looked up from my notes. I'm not a midwife. Martha, you mentioned helping with your sister's baby. That's more experience than anyone else in town right now. I could refuse, should refuse, maintain my professional distance, my careful isolation. Get me hot water and clean cloths. I heard myself say, now? The woman's cabin was small, her cries filling it completely. Her husband stood helpless in the corner, fear written across his young face. I pushed past my own fear into the familiar territory of crisis management assess. Plan, act. How long has she been laboring? Since yesterday morning, he whispered. Too long. I knelt beside her, felt her belly, checked the baby's position. Breech. My heart sank, but I kept my voice steady. I need help. Someone strong. Martha was already at the door. 5 minutes later, Connor arrived carrying hot water, clean cloths, and the calm efficiency I was beginning to associate with him. He didn't ask questions. Just set everything down and looked at me. What do you need? Your hands. And your ability to follow instructions. I can do that. 3 hours. That's how long we worked together in that small cabin. I talked constantly, explaining what I was doing, what I needed, what was happening. Connor followed every instruction without hesitation, his hands steady when mine wanted to shake. When the baby finally came, its cry filled the cabin like salvation. The young mother wept. Her husband collapsed with relief. I sat back on my heels, exhausted and exhilarated and terrified of what I'd just done. You saved them, Connor said quietly. Both of them. We saved them, I corrected. Then wished I hadn't used that word. We... Outside. The night air was cold and clean. Connor walked beside me in silence. At the hotel door, he stopped. You're good in a crisis. Mrs. Henderson? Kate? And so are you. Sheriff? Doesn't mean anything. His smile was brief. Sad. No, I suppose it doesn't. I watched him walk away. His shadow long in the lamplight. That night. I couldn't write in my journal. Couldn't explain what had shifted in those 3 hours. We'd worked together like we'd been doing it for years, not hours. Moved like partners. Thought like a team. 5 days left. 5 days to prove I didn't need this. Need him. Need any of this dangerous warmth spreading through my carefully frozen heart. I'd built my independence to survive. Now it felt less like armor and more like prison. Connor started appearing during my interviews. Making rounds, he'd say. Then stand quietly nearby while I talked to families, miners, shopkeepers. I stopped objecting. The silence between us shifted from hostile to something else. Something I didn't want to name. On day 4, he brought me coffee while I was writing at my usual table in the hotel lobby. Set it down without speaking. Started to leave. "Thank you," I said. He nodded and continued his patrol. The coffee was Martha's brew, strong enough to strip paint, sweet enough to make it bearable. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup and wondered when I'd stopped making coffee for just one. When had I started anticipating his presence? When had I begun noticing his absence? I was noticing things I shouldn't notice. The way he listened before speaking. How his eyes softened when children ran past. The calluses on his hands from work. Not violence. The careful way he never stood too close. That afternoon, a dispute erupted between 2 miners over a claim. I was interviewing a family nearby when the shouting started. Before I could move, Connor was there, stepping between the men with the quiet authority of someone who'd done this 100 times. But instead of taking over, he looked at me. "Mrs. Henderson here's been interviewing folks about life in mining camps. Maybe she could help settle this. Get both your stories down proper." The miners looked skeptical, but Connor's calm confidence made them listen. I found myself mediating, asking questions, helping them find middle ground. When they finally shook hands and walked away, still grumbling but no longer fighting, Connor and I shared a brief smile. "That was clever," I said. "You did the work. I just gave you the opening." Something warm flickered in my chest. I pushed it down. Later, I asked him about law enforcement for my article. We sat in the hotel lobby, and he talked about keeping peace in frontier towns, about the balance between justice and survival. His voice stayed carefully neutral when he mentioned his wife. Sarah died 3 years ago. Stage robbery between here and Denver. Driver fought back. Bandits started shooting. She was just... In the way, I recognized the control in his voice, the careful distance from his own pain. I used it too. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "People say that, like sorry changes anything?" He looked at me then. Really looked. "You understand? Though I can tell. My husband Henry died 2 years ago. Pneumonia. 1 week he was fine. The next..." I stopped. I never talked about this. I learned grief doesn't care about fair. "No," he agreed quietly. "It doesn't." We sat in silence. 2 people who'd built walls for the same reason. 4 days, I said finally. "I leave in 4 days." "I know." That night. I noticed I'd set 2 cups out that morning. Stared at them on my small table. One for me, one for anticipation, hope, old habits, I told myself. Lies. Myself answered. I was counting things I shouldn't count. His rare smiles. Moments our hands almost touched. Times I caught him watching me with something that looked like longing. Days passed. I stopped counting how many until I left. started counting other things instead. 4 days felt like forever, and no time at all. The invitation came on day 4. A family I'd interviewed, the Johnsons, wanted to thank me for writing letters to their relatives back east. They'd invited Connor, too. They said the sheriff needed a good meal. I wanted to refuse. Couldn't without seeming rude, so I went. Their cabin was small, but warm, crowded with children and the smell of stew. Mrs. Johnson fussed over us both, seating us together at the table. Her husband talked about his mining claim with pride, while children's laughter filled every corner. I watched Connor interact naturally with the youngest boy, showing him how to whittle. His hands were patient, his voice gentle. Something in my chest ached, watching it. After dinner, Mrs. Johnson asked the question I'd been dreading. "You have family back east, Mrs. Henderson." My practiced answer came automatically. "I manage fine alone." She gave me a knowing look, the kind older women perfect over years. Managing and living aren't the same thing. "Dear," the words hit like a physical blow. I made some excuse about needing air and stepped outside. The night was cold, stars sharp overhead. Connor found me a few minutes later. We stood in silence, our breath forming clouds in the frozen air. "I can't," the words burst out before I could stop them. "I shouldn't have come here." To dinner? To this town? To any of this? I turned to face him, something breaking open inside me. I came here to prove I could survive alone, that I didn't need anyone, especially not. I stopped. Especially not what? His voice was quiet. Connection? Community? This? I gestured helplessly between us. 2 years I've been perfecting independence. 2 years I've been proud of surviving alone. But tonight, watching that family, I remembered what I've been surviving without. Connor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "My wife died 3 years ago. 3 years I've been telling myself the job's enough, that keeping busy means I'm living." He looked at me then. "It's not. The job's not enough. It never was." We stood there. 2 people who'd been hiding from the same thing. From life. From possibility. From the terrifying risk of caring again. "You leave in 3 days," he said. "Yes." Neither of us moved to go inside. We just stood in the cold. Everything unspoken, hanging between us, like the visible breath of words we couldn't say. Finally, Mrs. Johnson called us back for pie. We went, sitting carefully apart now, too aware of each other. Walking back to the hotel later, Connor's hand brushed mine. Accidentally or deliberately. I couldn't tell. The contact lasted a second, but burned like flame. "Good night, Kate," he said at the hotel door. He'd never used my first name before. It sounded like a question, like a possibility. "Good night, Connor." That night I sat with my journal and couldn't write. How do you write about the moment you realize you've been lying to yourself, that the armor you built to survive grief has become the cage preventing you from living? I'd been so proud of managing alone. Tonight I learned managing wasn't enough. 3 days. I had 3 days to shore up my walls or let them fall. I didn't know which terrified me more. Dawn on day 5 brought the explosion. I jolted awake, the sound rolling through the valley like thunder. Then screaming. I dressed quickly, already knowing the mine. Something had collapsed. Connor was running toward the chaos when I reached the street. I followed without thinking, without deciding, just instinct, pulling me toward crisis, toward him. The mine entrance was surrounded by frantic families. Miners shouted conflicting information. The foreman tried to organize rescue efforts, but panic was winning. Connor's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone quiet. We need information, not noise." He started directing, sending men for equipment, organizing rescue teams. I saw the problem immediately. Too many voices. No coordination. "Connor, I can help." He looked at me. Trust, instant, in his eyes. "How? Organization, communication? I'm good at managing information." "Do it." I set up command in the assay office next to the mine. Found paper. Started making lists. Who was below? Who was accounted for? What equipment was needed? Which families needed notification? My journalist training became crisis management. Connor organized the physical rescue. I organized everything else. Hours blurred, then days. Coffee appeared at my elbow, Martha, keeping me functional. I tracked progress, coordinated families, wrote updates Connor could deliver. We worked in rhythm, anticipating each other's needs, moving like parts of the same machine. Hour 60. I looked up from my lists to find Connor collapsed in a chair, asleep on his feet. I touched his shoulder gently. "Connor, sleep? Just 15 minutes. I'll watch." He obeyed without argument, trusting me completely. I watched him sleep, his face smudged with coal dust, and realized with terrifying clarity I was in love with him. The thought should have panicked me. Instead, it settled like truth. Hour 70. They pulled out the last survivor alive. The town erupted in exhausted celebration. Families reunited, men embraced. Someone started singing. Connor and I stood apart from the celebration, filthy and depleted. Our eyes met across the crowd of rejoicing people. Everything we hadn't said hung between us. Everything we'd been too afraid to risk. He walked toward me slowly, stopped an arm's length away. "We did it. We did." I couldn't look away from his eyes. "Kate, I know. I did know." I saw it in his face. The same terrifying possibility I felt. But my stage left tomorrow. Dawn tomorrow. And neither of us said that. We cleaned up the command center in silence, heavy with all the unspoken words. Connor's hand brushed mine as we stacked papers. This time I knew it was deliberate. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For this, for everything. We're a good team." The word team hung between us like a question. "You leave tomorrow," he said finally. "Yes?" He nodded once and left. I stood alone in the empty office, surrounded by the evidence of what we'd accomplished together. 3 days we'd worked as partners, saved lives together, built something I'd sworn I wouldn't build. Tomorrow at dawn, I could leave all this, return to my carefully planned independence, prove I didn't need anyone, or I could stay and risk everything. My bag sat packed by the door. The stage would arrive at dawn. I'd written my article 7 days in a Colorado mining town. Observations on frontier life. Professional and distant as I'd intended. Except it was lies. All lies. I paced my small room, arguing with myself. I'd proven what I came to prove. A widow could succeed professionally without depending on anyone. Independence achieved. Mission accomplished. So why did leaving feel like running Martha knocked? Entered with tea without asking. She set the cup on my table and looked at me with those eyes that saw too much. "You leaving. Then, that was always the plan?" "Plans change." She sat in my only chair uninvited. "Life changes us. If we let it, I'm fine alone. Martha. Oh, child." Her voice was gentle. "You've been surviving these past days. You've been living. There's a difference." "I can't." My voice broke. "What if it's a mistake? What if I stay and it falls apart? What if it doesn't?" She stood, touched my shoulder briefly. What if this is the bravest thing you've ever done after she left? I sat on my bed staring at my packed bag. Everything I owned fit in one small case. 2 years I'd been paring down, learning to travel light, learning to need nothing, no one. I'd built this independence like others built houses carefully, brick by brick, until nothing could get in. Nothing could hurt me, but walls that keep pain out also keep life out. A knock. Connor stood in my doorway, hat in his hands, not asking to enter. Wanted to say goodbye and thank you for everything. He turned to leave. I almost let him go. Connor, wait. He stopped, back still to me. I don't know how to do this, I said to his back. I don't know how to risk this. How to... He turned then. Neither do I. Kate. 3 years I've been safe, careful, alone. He took one step into my room, but maybe we don't have to know. Maybe we just choose what to try, to risk, to live instead of just survive. We stood there, a room apart, everything hanging in the balance. The stage leaves at dawn. I whispered, I know. He didn't move toward me, didn't ask me to stay. Just respected my agency to choose. Good night, Kate. After he left. I sat by my window watching the town settle into night, families reuniting in their homes, neighbors checking on neighbors, community I'd kept at arm's length. I thought about Henry, about the year after he died when I could barely breathe, how I'd built armor to survive that grief. But grief had passed dulled to a manageable ache. I'd been wearing armor with no enemy. Just habit. Just fear. What was I proving by leaving? That I could survive alone, I already knew that. I'd proven it every day for 2 years. Was this independence or just fear with a noble name I'd spent 2 years being strong? Maybe it was time to be brave. Maybe strength wasn't surviving alone. Maybe it was choosing connection despite the risk. Maybe independence didn't mean needing no one. Maybe it meant choosing partnership from a position of strength, not desperation. Outside. The first hint of dawn touched the sky. The stage would arrive soon. I had to choose. The stage pulled up to the hotel at dawn. I heard the driver's call, the jingle of harnesses, Martha moving downstairs to greet early risers. My bag sat by the door, but I sat at the small table, writing. Martha found me there 20 minutes later. Stage is here. Dear. I looked up from my letter. I'm not taking it. Her smile was knowing, unsurprised. Figured you might say that. I'm terrified. Martha. The admission came easy now. What if this is a mistake? What if I'm giving up everything I've built? What if you're not giving up anything? She poured herself tea, settled in like we had all the time in the world. What if you're just adding to it? I don't know how to do this. How to be part of something again. Nobody knows, child. We all just choose and figure it out as we go. After she left, I finished my letter to my editor. 3 versions before I found the truth. I'm extending my stay in Colorado indefinitely. This town's story isn't finished, and neither is mine. There's more to document here: the building of community, the healing of a town after crisis, the ongoing challenges of frontier life. I'll send regular dispatches. I didn't write the whole truth. That I was staying for morning coffee that appeared at my elbow. For the way Connor's eyes softened when they found mine. For the feeling of working beside someone as a partner. For the terrifying, wonderful possibility of living instead of just surviving. I found Connor at the sheriff's office. He looked up when I entered, hope and fear warring in his expression. "I'm staying." He stood slowly. Why, this was my moment, my choice, my voice. I came here to prove I could survive alone. And I have. But these 7 days taught me something more important. I took a breath. Surviving isn't the same as living. I want to live. Connor, I want to try living here, building community, being part of something, and I want to try it with you if you're willing. I'm willing. His voice was rough, scared, but willing. Me too. We stood there. Two damaged people, choosing to risk anyway. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together?" Together? I tested the word. I'm learning what that means again. We didn't kiss. Too public. Too soon. Too much to process. But our hands found each other. His grip was steady. Warm. Anchoring. "What will you do?" he asked. For work, Martha suggested the town needs a newspaper. Real journalism, not just mining reports. The idea had been growing since she mentioned it. Stories about real people. The community building here. Truth-telling. His smile was genuine. This town could use some truth. I spent the rest of the day making plans. Talked to the printer about equipment. Looked at a small storefront that could become an office. Wrote in my journal for the first time in days. New Year's Day, I arrived with a resolution: prove I could survive alone. January 7th. I'm choosing a different resolution: prove I can thrive in community. Build connection from strength, not desperation. Risk love again. Not because I need rescue, but because I choose partnership. That evening, I watched Connor walk past my window on his patrol. He looked up, saw me, smiled. Something warm and terrifying and wonderful settled in my chest. I'd chosen not survival, not safety, not the armor of independence. I'd chosen life. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt alive. Summer came to Colorado, and I was still here. Not because I couldn't leave, because I chose to stay. That distinction mattered. My newspaper office occupied a small storefront on Main Street. The Colorado Truth published every week now stories about the people who built this town. The mine families, the shopkeepers, the struggles and victories of frontier life. Real stories, honestly told. People trusted me now. "Mrs. Henderson gets the truth right," they'd say. I'd earned that trust, word by word, story by story. Martha had become more than my landlord. She was family, the mother I'd lost young, the friend I'd stopped letting myself need. We drank tea together in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Connor and I were courting, slowly, carefully, honestly. Two damaged people learning to trust again. Sunday dinners together. Evening walks when his patrol ended, conversations that deepened week by week. We still wore our wedding rings on chains, honoring the past while building toward a future. Different from what we'd lost, but no less real. Grief doesn't disappear. I'd told him one evening, "Henry's still gone. Your Sarah's still gone. But grief and love aren't opposites. They can coexist." He'd taken my hand. Hearts are bigger than we knew. Today, a young widow stepped off the stage. I recognized myself in her careful posture, her guarded eyes, the way she held her single bag like armor. I offered her coffee at Martha's hotel, listened without pushing. When she asked how long I'd been in town, I smiled. 6 months, came for 1 week. "What made you stay?" I learned the difference between surviving and living. I poured more coffee. Take your time. There's no deadline for healing, and no shame in building a new life when you're ready. After she left, I walked to my office. Connor was waiting outside. Leaning against the wall with that half-smile I'd learned meant he had news. Mrs. Sarah Chen's baby arrived, mother and son doing well. I'll write the announcement. I unlocked my door. Coffee. Always. We'd developed rituals, small, domestic, ordinary, extraordinary. I made coffee while he read my draft editorial about the new school building. When I set his cup beside mine on my desk, I noticed them 2 cups, side by side. Some mornings, I still marveled at that simple change. From 1 to 2. From alone to together. You're smiling, Connor observed. Just thinking about how I almost left. I'm glad you didn't. Me too. Through my window, I watched the town live and breathe. Children running to school. Miners heading to their shifts. Families building lives in this hard, beautiful place. I'd thought independence meant needing no one. I'd learned it meant choosing connection from strength. Choosing partnership as an equal, not from desperation, but from abundance. I'd thought strength was surviving alone. I'd learned it was allowing yourself to be known, to be helped, to be loved. That young widow reminded me who I'd been 6 months ago. So, certain isolation equaled strength. So sure, surviving alone was victory. She wasn't wrong to protect herself. She just wasn't ready yet to stop protecting and start living. I hoped she'd find her way to ready. Her way to choosing. Connor's hand covered mine on the desk. I turned my palm up, laced our fingers together. "What are you thinking?" he asked. That I'm grateful for that mind collapse that forced me to see. For Martha, who saw through my armor. For you, who respected my choice enough not to ask me to stay. Best thing I ever didn't do. He agreed. I learned something these 6 months. Real courage isn't surviving tragedy. It's choosing to live fully afterward. It's risking your heart again, even though you know how much it can hurt. Wise woman, he murmured. Learning to be. I closed my journal and picked up my pen. Tomorrow's newspaper waited to be written. Outside my window, life continued messy and beautiful and real. This was the life I'd chosen, and I chose it still. Every single day. That was the secret I'd learned. That was everything. Independence didn't mean needing no one. It meant choosing connection from strength. It meant being brave enough to live, not just survive. New Year's Day, I'd arrived alone, determined to prove I needed nothing and no one. Today, I belonged. To this town, to this community, to this man whose hand held mine across a desk scattered with papers and possibility. The difference was everything.